Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Read and Reread. I am Angelia, and today is time again for Friday Reads on August the whatever. August, why do I never know? August the 11th. I hope that you've been having a good week and that you are heading into a nice weekend with good books and everything else. I do want to stop and just say how sad I am for the people in Maui watching the coverage of those fires. It is heartbreaking. I hope that comes to an end soon, but it's just terrible. And I am officially not going to complain about the weather here anymore because that is just absolutely terrible. So let's start with TV. So I was talking last time about how we got caught up in rewatching The Bear, and I just got so obsessed about this. We had to watch all the rest of it all over again, and it really was a good one to rewatch because there was so many things in the second season that were hinted at in the first. You could see that there had been a plan across the two seasons. It was really good, and our daughter got completely caught up in it too. By the end, we were kind of neck and neck on the same episodes and talking about them, and it was fun. So then we have gone on to Reservation Dogs, and we've watched, I think we've seen the ones that have been dropped so far, so we're along with that. And then I think we're also going to start Only Murders in the Building season 3. So that's where we're at. What are you watching right now? And I still haven't figured out where Brooklyn is streaming. I want to watch the movie because I love the book. So that was TV. So I'm going to jump right into the books because I finished 3 books and I'm on another one. So it sounds more than it is because one was the short stories that I read for a couple of weeks. And I forgot when I was talking about bookmarks the other day, I completely forgot that I have this Colson Whitehead bookmark, and whoops, sorry. And this is what I used while I was reading Harlem Shuffle again and then Crook Manifesto. And my family made fun of me because I bought this bookmark at Book People in Austin, and they were teasing me for why would you buy a bookmark? You have 500,000 bookmarks. But I really liked this one, and I use it a lot, and I used it through those 2 books. So let's talk about reading. First, where we left off, I was reading Old God's Time by Sebastian. That is a major glare there. Woo! But anyway, I did finish this book. I need to send it back to the library because I think they have something for me. First of all, it is extraordinarily sad. It is a very... It gets dark really fast, and it's very sad. And let me just tell you a little bit about it. So this is, I did tell a little bit, but as I read on, the darkness deepened. But it is about a man named Tom Kettle, who is a retired police officer. We find out eventually that he is 66. And by the end of this book, I also figured out that this takes place in the mid-90s. I knew it was a little bit in the past, and I couldn't figure out how far in the past it was because I was trying to identify. I could tell they didn't have cell phones, but they did have DNA technology, and so I couldn't quite place it. And then somebody mentioned they asked him if he had gone to see the bridges of Madison County, and I realized, oh, okay, so I looked that up, and that came out in 1995. So that's how I finally placed it in the mid-90s. So he's Irish. He has retired from the police force, and he is a widower. And he has rented a little flat in a castle that's been cut up into flats, and he spends his days peacefully gazing out at the Irish Sea, and he's isolated. And then a few former colleagues that are younger cops come to the door one day, and they ask him if he will take a look at a file of a cold case that has some new evidence that has come up. He does not want to look at this file. He does not want to talk about this case. He kind of, he dodges the topic. He just kind of puts on a show of being a amiable, doddery old man, and he, makes them some Welsh rabbit which I had to look up and make sure he wasn't actually cooking a rabbit, but it's more like a cheese toast with a saucy cheese toast. And anyway, he sends them on their way. Well, the issue doesn't die out that quickly, and his former boss also comes around with some questions. And we start to move through Tom's mind, and Tom's mind is an interesting and puzzling place. It's like a kaleidoscope, and most of this book is very stream of consciousness through Tom's thoughts and memories. He has trouble staying grounded in the current time. I don't think that he has dementia. I think this is more of the accumulation of some immense amounts of trauma that have occurred over his life. And I don't want to give out any spoilers, but at many points in his life, he has seen and experienced and witnessed and survived a lot of things. And I think that cumulatively, at this point in his life, he is just trying to not live in them 100% of the time. And so Tom's memories and his narration are extremely unreliable to the point that as a reader, it is pretty disorienting. And I think this is on purpose. Things happen. We know sometimes when he's sliding in and out of memories, but other times when he's supposed to be in the present, sometimes it's very concrete down to the texture of his clothes and a spot on the countertop and a bird in a tree. And then other times an entire scene and conversations with a person occur, and then a few moments later you realize that that couldn't have possibly have occurred. And he even is sometimes startled to find out that things that he thought just happened or were real couldn't have taken place. And so Tom's narration and the experience of trying to live in his mind is a struggle. And it's just at the core of it all, though, is his fierce undying love for his wife June, who has passed before him. And gradually we find out the when she died and why she died and things like that, and also about his two children. But he is so in love with June, and he unfortunately his happy memories of when they met and fell in love and just these brief flashes, she's so concrete in his mind, but they tend to get marred by unhappy memories that come alongside. And again, it's a study in the living with trauma and how people survive or don't survive, or how they cope or how they don't cope, and all these kind of things. And as far as topics, I mean, there is a mystery. There is a storyline about institutional abuse of children by priests in orphanages and foster home situations, group homes, ward trauma, work trauma of a police officer, family life thing. You know, I don't want to. I'm not going to be specific because I don't want to spoil it if you're going to read this Booker long list novel. But all of these things, and when you get to the last third of the book, it's like a big crescendo of just revelations and sad things, and it piles on, and it's pretty tough. It's beautifully written, almost poetically written, and this is my caveat or whatever, the flaw for me in the reading of it is that at sometimes the writing, it's almost, I don't like to use the phrase overwritten because I think it gets used a lot, but it is kind of like that, where there's a really fine line between when the writing is beautiful and you're immersed in it, and then when it's too obvious and you're just looking at it, and it you almost fall out of the story, and it distracts you. It's like somebody playing the piano and putting in a bunch of fancy runs and trills because they can. So I think that is a little bit, for me, it was a little bit of a flaw in the novel, is that he Barry overdid it from time to time, and it distracted me from Tom, who was carrying things pretty well on his own. So yes, I did think it was a good book. I've only read 2 books by Sebastian Barry, this one and Days Without End. I liked Days Without End a lot more. Really loved the narrator in that book and the love story there as well. I really, really liked the main character, Tom. I found it incredibly sad. I wouldn't say that I loved the book. I liked it but didn't love it. So that's like my final thought on that. So Old God's Time by Sebastian Barry. And if you are reading Booker titles, I do think it's worthwhile. I don't think like, oh, skip this one. I mean, it is really good, but just be prepared that it is misery may cred all day long, but it was good. All right, so shifting gears to something more lively, and it's kind of weird to say it's not happier. It's not happier. It's more fun. With Crook Manifesto by Colson Whitehead, and I had the greatest time reading this. It was such a romp. I don't know why, and he did it on purpose to make us have fun reading about criminals and people that don't really have to be criminals, but they decide to do it anyway for various purposes. So this, of course, is a sequel. It's the second part of a trilogy that Whitehead has planned, with the main character, Ray Carney, who runs a furniture store in Harlem. Carney is the son of a now dead and infamous crook in Harlem who really had no boundaries or morals, just a kind of a bad guy. But Carney is a little different, or at least he tries to be. And he goes through many spells and even jags of years where he stays on the straight and narrow, but inevitably something happens that tempts him back into the crooked side of the street. And what he does is that he has his furniture store, which is legit, but he also fences stolen goods on the side. He will find a buyer for them. He knows who to talk to if somebody suddenly has some jewelry or televisions or whatever it is. So he does that on the side off and on throughout these books. Then something will scare him and he straightens up and doesn't do anything for a while, and then he kind of slips back into it. So in the beginning of this book, after the events of Harlem Shuffle, he has not participated in any of this for a few years. He's told all the people that come around he's out. But his teenage daughter, who is a preschooler in the first book, because we've moved up from the 60s to the 70s, she really, 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 really wants Jackson 5 tickets, and he wants to give them to her. So he thinks he can just dabble and do a little one-off job to get these tickets. And of course, things go sideways and he gets way more involved than he planned. And in this book, though, we have 3 parts, and they're basically 3 novellas that connect together. And that's not the structure of the first book. The first book was one narrative, went all the way through. And this one, we have 3 parts. And I think as far as it being a second book, that is effective. I think it might not have worked well if he did that in the first book, because we really needed the continuity and the development of the characters. But it works in this one because we know the characters, and so it's okay to move around and kind of highlight certain people. And it also takes place in 3 times in the 70s, a couple of years apart. And so the first part of the story is the Jackson 5 incident. The second part moves forward a couple of years. And this is my favorite part, because this is when the main character of this part of the story, Ray kind of steps back a little bit, and the main character is Pepper. And I love the character Pepper. Pepper is an older crook who ran with Ray's dad. He's kind of become a friend of the family and an occasional muscle man sidekick on various jobs. And Pepper he's inscrutable, he's unflappable. He knows New York City like the back of his hand, especially Harlem. He knows the history of every dive bar, every burnt out building. He knows what it was in its glory days. He knows who is running what. He is a consummate student of human behavior and human nature, and he's also always puzzled by it. All of the inconsistencies and weirdnesses of people. I mean, I don't know why I find this, why do I find this character who steals and he's violent and he even is a murderer, but he is funny, he's smart. I love Pepper. He's so great. So in the second part, it's about the making of a blaxploitation film, which partially is filmed in Ray's furniture store. And this also brings back the character Zippo, who was in Harlem Shuffle, who is a photographer, an artist, kind of a little bit of an arsonist on the side, and he's making a film called Nefertiti TNT. And here I want to just mention the joy that Whitehead infuses into 1970s Harlem. Just all of the details of the music, the clothes, the films, the way things were, and the bad with the good. There's also a time there was a lot of struggles in the city. There was trash pileups. There was a string of random arsons and clashes between the police and the Black Panthers and the Black Liberation Army. And all this is covered, but it just creates such a fabulous tapestry that you can see how much fun Whitehead had recreating this world. And so anyway, that's the second part. And then the third part is another storyline a couple years later, once again. And I'm not going to get into what all these plots are because I don't want to tell too much, but I found it very enjoyable. And the one thing, my only problem is I got to the very end, I turned the last page, and I'm expecting to see like an acknowledgement section or an afterword where Whitehead talks about his research that he did, because he had to look up stuff about the politics, the architectural history, the history of fires and their causes for this book, the placement of the pop culture references at the right time, and he didn't say anything. The librarian in me really wanted to know what he read or studied or watched to make the backdrop to the books, and he didn't mention any. Now I need to go back and see if he did it in the other book, because I know that he did a ton of research to make this so vivid, and he did not explain his sources. So I have a little problem with that. But other than that, I had a great time reading this. And if you're interested, if these sound good to you, go back and read the Harlem Shuffle and then read this. I don't know how it would come across standing by itself. All right, the other book that I finished this week is, if you have a favorite Colson Whitehead book, tell me down below. I don't want to pick out a favorite. I know that probably if I had to say, well, what was the best, I'd have to pick Underground Railroad or The Nickel Boys. But what was the most fun was these two books about Harlem. I mean, when you read The Nickel Boys, that kind of feels like reading old God's Time. It's so good, but it's so devastating. You don't go, well, that was fun. But these last two books were very fun, and sometimes I just want some fun when I'm reading. All right, so then, anyway, moving on. Rainbow Rainbow by Lydia Conklin. This was a collection of short stories. They're not linked short stories, and I'm aware more and more that if I'm going to read an entire book of short stories, I kind of want them to be linked. Otherwise, I really need to spread them out more. When I just read one after the other, I get a little, I don't know, like I'm ready to go somewhere else. So it's not my favorite style of reading short stories unless they are connected. But these were pretty good. Kind of uneven, which always happens, or most of the time, when I read a book that's just an assortment of short stories. Some rise up as really strong and others are not that memorable. But the common thread, even though they're not linked, is characters that are at a crossroads and usually involving gender and sexuality and relationships. And so we have people that are trans or non-binary, and sometimes the person has not come out, and they're on the precipice of that, and they're trying to decide the timing or how to talk to people in their lives about it, and then they're upset because they're being misgendered or someone makes a remark, but the person doesn't know what's going on, so it's inescapable. And they're worried about relationships or how their partner will take this news or how their partner will respond to changes that they want to make in their bodies, and the all of those kind of anxieties that would come up when somebody is about to transition. So I found that interesting and very touching to read about. I'm probably going to choose one of the ones I like the best and put it into my 30 stories in 30 days and take a second look. But those are my initial thoughts about this, and I will be interested to see whether Lydia Conklin does more short stories or a longer form or a novel in the future. They are a writing professor, so I'm sure there's more to come, but this was an interesting first book. And that brings me to what I'm currently reading, which won't last very long, but I am reading Summer by Edith Wharton, and I started it last night, and I'm like I'm halfway through because it's a very short book, so I'll probably read the rest today or this evening. And this is a story about Charity Royal, who is, it doesn't take place in New York. It's in a very small New England town, a small, tiny, nothing to do, nowhere to go, everybody in your business, little town. And Charity is a young woman who everyone enjoys reminding her all the time that she should be grateful because Lawyer Royal, her guardian, brought her down from a nearby mountain where a lot of people live in poverty at an early age, and he and his wife supposedly were going to raise her, but his wife passed away. He's never adopted her. He's been her guardian. His thoughts and intentions toward her are muddled, and he's an unreliable. She has heard stories about where she came from and the circumstances, but we increasingly are aware that he tells a story to suit himself. And she is just young and bored and yearning to get out in the world, but she's just kind of stuck. She has a job 2 days a week as a really bad librarian. She sits around and she's not interested in the books, and she doesn't really want to talk to anybody. And she just kind of sits and does some knitting and passes the time, and then she leaves early. And so, but it's the only thing she could come up with to make some money. And then she meets a guy. A guy comes to town. He's painting pictures of all the old buildings around the place, and he's hot and good looking and not from around there, which makes him much more attractive than maybe he would be otherwise. And it is about the beginning of that relationship and her sexual awakening. I think for the time period that it was written in 1916, and it's quite descriptive about sexual attraction. And she wants this guy, and she wants more from life than what is around. So that's where I am thus far. We will see what happens. Knowing Edith Wharton, this relationship will not have a happy ending, but you never know. Maybe Edith has a surprise up her sleeve, but I'm skeptical about that. So I don't know what I'm going to read next. I have about 3 or 4 that are really calling to me to read them next, and we will see who wins, probably by tomorrow. And I will be back to report on that. But you've seen them all in my August TBR, so something will rise up to the surface. And also, the books that I was waiting for in the mail came in, and so I will be doing a haul video on Tuesday, and I'm excited to share those with you. Let me know what you've been reading this week or what you have set aside for this weekend, and I will be checking back on Tuesday. I just found out that my daughter's going to be able to come and visit for a couple of days. I think she's going to come on Sunday and visit with us for a few days before her semester starts. So that will be fun. And so I will be back soon. Bye.